Hello and welcome to this third lecture in my family law series, and in this lecture we're going to be looking at the different trends in family law, and so how different parts of society and whatnot are linked to family law. By way of introduction, I am Charlie Medcalf. I am the individual in charge of the Law with Charlie brand, and I am currently a Law LLB student. And so, without any further ado, let's go straight into this lecture. So, what can you expect to develop by the end of this lecture? So you should be able to describe the links which family law has with different aspects of society. You should then be able to explain the different types of legal relationships and how these have developed over time. And just to let you know, yes, you are expected to be able to explain the different types, but we will go into the different types of legal relationships in much more detail in later lectures, as well as we look at adult legal relationships. But you also need to critically analyse the developments and statistics in this area of law in order to reach conclusions about the suitability of these relationships, which we're going to be talking about in modern society. And it's probably worth mentioning just briefly here that critical analysis is extremely important for any law students, and so it's important that you do practice that skill before your assessments, particularly if you are in your second or third or final year of your law degree, especially if you are a law student who is watching this, whether that's for learning, aiding your understanding, trying to develop your understanding by listening to someone else explain this area of law, or whether you're using this area for revision or even just out of interest. But even if you don't cover this kind of content on your family law course, the things we will learn in this section of the course, from my second lecture onwards, you can really develop your answers in any other areas of family law by drawing on the various knowledge which we're going to be going through in these lectures. Let's move on to the first key component, and that is families and individuals, and so the trends concerning family and individuals. So firstly, couples often attempt to resolve disputes themselves, largely because of legal aid. So in family, there is Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to respect for private and family life. And yes, couples should be encouraged to resolve disputes themselves, whether that is informally together and can't both calm down and sit down and work it out, or if it's much more serious, and for instance ending a legal relationship through mediation or arbitration, particularly mediation in family law. And that's important because the courts are overloaded, and the courts really do not like it when couples go to court with pointless claims which they could have agreed to outside of court. But my main message here is that when it comes to court, couples often don't have a choice other than to represent and resolve disputes themselves. They're litigants in person, i.e. they don't have any legal representation, but they're doing it themselves. And this is because of legal aid and how legal aid has been dramatically reduced in the family law sector for the last few years because of the LASPO legislation. And so that is one key problem with family law and how it impacts individuals. Furthermore though, individuals should have freedom to make their own decisions, and so yes, we should let individuals decide what they want to do and what not. But I would argue that maybe a courtroom isn't the best place for that, especially if the other side does have legal representation. Furthermore, families provide a social welfare system, and this protects the government, the state. And so essentially, rather than many of the individuals in their family needing to ask the government for benefits, for instance, they can get support firstly from their family, whether that is a couple supporting each other or parents supporting their children. So it provides a bit of a social welfare system, both financially and otherwise, and that not only benefits the public and public services and all of that, but it's also really good for those individuals part of that family, as it can build a closer connection and develop familial bonds. Also, couples do impose their own moral values to agreements as well, and not that of the judge. And so this can be problematic in family law, because when we get to court, how can the judge come up with a right decision which may take into account these moral values, the agreements? And essentially, I don't think they can, really. And that's one of the key criticisms of family law. And so that is another thing which is unique about individuals and families. Families are often shaped by the individuals who are part of them, and so it will be from the couple's own moral values that the family takes a particular form, or the family looks a certain way. However, as I've mentioned here, there is inequality of bargaining power, and so, for instance, and this is particularly the case when it comes to prenuptial agreements, which again we will look at in our adult legal relationships and breakdown of relationships lectures. But if the husband has lots of money and the wife does not, and they agree to keep all the possessions they had before the marriage for themselves only, and if the marriage was to break down, they wouldn't be able to claim for each other's, that can cause problems and inequality, and that can be largely because one has a much stronger bargaining position than the other individual. And so the family law does step in that scenario to interfere essentially with families and the individuals part of them, in order to ensure fairness in some circumstances. Also, a question I want to pose to you, and please do let me know what you think in the comments section below, but is mediation really as neutral as we believe it to be? Can we really be confident that mediation is neutral, and that the mediator hasn't been influenced by one party or another in some way? Another key connection though with family is politics, and this is really emphasised in the family test, the link of which is on the slide for you to look at in more detail. And essentially, this part of the family test mentions how the family test brings a family perspective into policy making. It helps ensure impacts on family relationships and functioning, both positive and negative, are recognised in the process of policy development and help inform the policy decisions made by ministers. And so this is really emphasising how politics has an impact on families and vice versa as well to an extent. And so it's important that when we are going through the process of policy development, that ministers do actually think, how will this impact on families and the individuals within family? And that's particularly because we're a democracy, because if they don't take into account families, that could cost them votes as well. So that's one of the other reasons why families and politics are again connected. But if you're looking for more information on the family test and more trends in family law and much more depth into this, then do check out my premium content, but I will tell you more about my premium content at the end of this lecture. So now, what is the purpose of marriage? There's a number of different purposes. On the one level, it provides a sense of love and belonging, and that's according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so bringing in some psychology. But can also prevent loneliness and give individuals a sense of purpose. As we previously mentioned, it provides for a social welfare system. Families, if there are families, then they may be able to care for dependents, and it also offers them legal protection. For instance, the Article 8 right to private and family life. So there are a number of purposes for marriage, but also the purposes of marriage may be different for each person. And that's not to say that they won't have all of these benefits. Some of them may not, particularly the sense of love and belonging, preventing loneliness, etc., etc. Because if it's an abusive relationship, which is resulting in domestic abuse, then that will not be the case. But I think what the area I'm getting at is, because family means something different to each person, and marriage can mean different things for different people, a couple can create their own purpose of why they want to be married. And so the purpose of marriage, although we can categorise it generally, it can also be much more unique and specialised and individual to those who are getting married. But marriage is obviously a really old institution, shall we call it, and it's got a long history, which is what we're going to look at now, because it can be tracked back to roughly the 19th century, and in the case of Hyde and Woodmansey, it was mentioned how marriage, as understood in Christendom, is a voluntary union for life of one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others. And so this was a creation of the church, and it reflects Christian values and beliefs before it was taken over by the government. And so essentially, traditionally, those who get married would do so largely because of their religion, and it reflects the Christian faith, Christian values and Christian beliefs. And so this is one of the purposes why individuals may get married, and there could be even more religious reasons why as well. For instance, to be forgiven from sins, or to get to the next stage of their life and to further praise God, for instance. But yeah, this is one element of it, and the government essentially took marriages out of the hands of the church because it could see how important marriage was to society. It is worth mentioning though at this point that the Church of England in particular, does still have a really big influence on family law, well, on marriage, and there are things which the church can do. The church still have legal authority to do marriages, for instance, and there is legislation in place which restricts the church from doing some kinds of marriage ceremonies, and they can't do civil partnerships either. But yeah, the government essentially took over because they could see how important it is, and the financial advantages, whether that's through death and tax, housing, etc., etc. But then, because it was taken over by the government, it's then become much wider, much broader, and you will now not see marriage specifically in the Christian faith, but it will be extended to people of all different faiths, and even those who do not follow a particular faith. And so here's some statistics to see how things have changed and developed in the 20th and 21st century. So in 1971, divorce petitions by wives increased by 85.5% compared to husbands, where it raised by 5.5%. Then in Bellinger in 2002, it was identified how marriage is essentially a contract regulated by the state. And that is correct. Marriage is essentially a contract, but it's a very special kind of contract because of the legal status it has and the legal impact of a marriage. Furthermore, Mr. Justice Coleridge has previously commented on the fact that obtaining a divorce is easier than getting a driving licence. I'm not going to go into too much detail or critical analysis on this statement, because that is what I will do in my premium content. And so again, if you're interested in developing your answers, developing your knowledge and your critical analysis, please do check out my premium content, which I will speak more about later. But yeah, it might be worth thinking about whether that is right what Mr. Justice Coleridge has said, and feel free to let me know in the comment section. And also, the Divorce, Dissolution and Separation Act 2020 has now allowed for unilateral applications, and so we can see how the law on marriage and divorce is still constantly evolving to reflect societal attitudes and how society and families in particular are changing, especially marriage, because marriage as well is also changing. But again, that's the kind of material you will find on my premium content. So another type of legal relationship is cohabitation. And this is essentially where you're living together but you are not in a legal relationship like marriage or civil partnership, and so there's no legal regulation nor relationship. But in order for cohabitation to be cohabitation, there is a requirement for there to be a sexual relationship, and so it's living together as if you were married or civil partners when actually you're not. And so many people will start out as cohabitants, and some may then later go on to become civil partners or get married, or some individuals might never marry or become civil partners and might stay as cohabitants for the rest of their lives, if that's what they're happy with. But yeah, cohabitation is essentially living as if you are married or civil partners, but without that legal relationship. And so, in order for cohabitation, other than there having to be a sexual relationship, the couple must have also lived in the same house together for a minimum of 2 years. And also, cohabitation has increased across most ages, and particularly in the 25 to 29 age group. And that's important when we're considering marriage and marriage in the younger generation. So that is another type of relationship. Yet another, a third type of relationship which we're looking at is that of same-sex relationships. And again, there has been a gradual increase in the recognition of legal relationships for many same-sex couples. So on the grand scheme of things, it's only relatively recently where individuals were able to be in a same-sex relationship, both morally and legally. Previously, individuals were not allowed to be in a sexual same-sex relationship. They couldn't take part in sexual activity if they were of the same sex. And really, the idea of civil partnership for same-sex couples and marriage for same-sex couples is still a relatively new concept. And so marriage has been around for many, many, many years, yet same-sex marriage has only been around for a fraction of the time. And so one of the key cases in this area is that of Gaydon and Godin Mendoza from 2004. And you might also be aware of this case from public law, i.e. constitutional and administrative law, but essentially here, the Rent Act referred to those living as his or her wife or husband, but the House of Lords reinterpreted this as those who are living as spouses. And essentially this confirms that Section 3 of the Human Rights Act empowers courts to reinterpret statutory language so that same-sex partners may benefit, provided the interpretation respects the legislation's underlying purpose. And so essentially it's expanding the idea of living as his or her wife or husband to include same-sex relationships to show society's developing attitudes towards same-sex couples. Then obviously the whole idea of same-sex relationships has been dramatically developed within the Civil Partnerships Act in 2004, and also the same-sex marriages legislation in 2014. So civil partnerships could be entered into from 2004, and then same-sex marriages in 2014. So then we go on to opposite-sex civil partnerships, and this is another area where I discuss this area of the law in much more detail in my premium content. So again, if you're interested in this area, please do look at my premium content. More information will be given at the end. But essentially, in the case of Steinfeld and Caden and the Secretary of State for International Development from 2018, and this is a Supreme Court case, it was held that it was not a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim to keep delaying a final decision on whether to extend civil partnerships to opposite-sex couples. And essentially, maintaining a discriminatory legal regime in family law requires strong justification, and delay or administrative convenience will not satisfy Articles 14 and 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And so I will go into much more detail in my premium content on the facts of this case and all of that stuff, but essentially this was about the government delaying making a decision on whether to extend civil partnerships to opposite-sex couples. And the relevant legislation came into play in the Civil Partnerships, Marriages and Deaths Registration, etc. Act of 2019. And again, this would be another area to get in your critical analysis, which is vitally important if you're looking at getting those higher grades. So now, let's have a look at yet another new development in English law, and that is the development of, well, it's particularly the LGBT community, but in particular, transgender rights and relationships. And so this isn't extremely new, but it's not old either. This is very much like same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships, although it's been around for slightly longer, because treatment for gender dysphoria has been available on the NHS since the 1990s. But then gender reassignment is now a protected characteristic under the Equality Act 2010, meaning to treat someone who's gone through gender reassignment differently is to discriminate against them. And so this has volunteered separate legislation, and the law in relation to trans people can be found in the Gender Recognition Act of 2004. And as such, this is a very relevant area for family law, and it also considers many human rights aspects as well under the 1998 Act. So yeah, for more detail, obviously premium content, but let's have a look now at one aspect of transgender rights and relationships in family law. And this comes from the Corbett Test. And in Corbett and Corbett of 1971, the claimant was trying to enforce a claim for maintenance, but the defendant counterclaimed that the marriage was void, as the claimant was actually a man rather than a woman as they had thought. And so essentially, this provides limitations for couples who want to change, for individuals who want to change their gender. The gender assigned at birth essentially cannot be altered, especially by sex change operation, because you are either a woman or a man. And biologically, although you can change yourself to an extent, there are features of a male body which only belong with a male body, and there's features of a female body which only relate to the female body. But essentially, to pass the Corbett test, there's 3 criteria, and that would be chromosomal, gonadal, and genital. But yet again, for more information in this area, check out my premium content, or feel free to read the Corbett and Corbett judgment in more detail to get more of an idea of this area of the law. So now the legislation. The main legislation in this area, as I've said, has been the Gender Recognition Act of 2004. So this distinguishes, well, one part of this act distinguishes when a transgender individual needs a gender recognition certificate or not, and whether they have a gender recognition certificate can depend on the rights a transgender individual actually has. And so if a transgender individual does not have a gender recognition certificate, they can change their names and pronouns on utility bills. They can change their gender for service providers such as banks. They can change their gender for employers and monitoring surveys, as well as their gender on their passport and driving license. However, without a gender recognition certificate, they cannot get a new birth certificate with their new gender on for marriage purposes, nor does it change their pension entitlement. And so a gender recognition certificate is needed for those two things. So this essentially concludes this lecture, and so I'm hoping that now, by the end of this lecture, you'll be able to describe the links which family law has with different aspects of society, and maybe you'll even be able to draw even more links as well. You should now be able to explain the different types of legal relationships and how these have also developed over time, and also critically analyse the developments of statistics in this area of law in order to reach conclusions about the suitability of these relationship types in modern society. And so that final one, the critical analysis, is essential in order to fully meet that learning objective. But as I say, that now concludes this lecture video, and so please do like, comment and subscribe for more content like this. If you have any questions, comments or anything at all, please let me know in the comments section below. I love it when people give me comments, or even when people ask me questions. It's always great to know that people are watching these videos and that you are wanting to interact by submitting a comment. So please do give me some comments. Also, please do ensure that you're subscribing and liking. By liking, I can know that you like this content and that you want more of this content. You can, by liking, you show me there's a demand for this content, meaning I can then go out and record more of these kinds of videos. But also subscribing, it's essential for both me and you. For me, it shows me that you are interested in this content and that you're going to be loyal and that you want this content, you need this content, and also it's going to encourage me to and motivate me to do more content like this, as well as helping me to be noticed by others as well, who may be law students or other individuals interested in the law who could benefit from this kind of knowledge. But it also benefits you by subscribing, because then you will not miss any of my next videos or content. And I've got many different plans for different videos. I've got many more lectures like this to deliver, but also there's going to be various advice videos, tip videos, and things like applying to law school, bar course, etc. And so if you want to know how you can succeed in law school, and you want to know what law schools don't tell you in order to succeed and do your very best, then you must subscribe so you don't miss out on that content. And also, do share my videos with your friends or anyone else who you think may be interested, and encourage them to subscribe as well, because you never know how much this might benefit them. And if you haven't already, check out my podcast. That's available on both my YouTube channel, but also Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music and all of that. and that's also really good to listen to. Lots of the content is similar to my YouTube, but there's also lots of content which is very different and not on YouTube other than through the podcast. And finally, my premium content. So my premium content will help support my journey, and it's not just my premium content, but there's more ways you can support my journey, which are discussed in the description below, so please do check that out. Particularly the easy fundraising one, because that helps me fundraise for my journey and for developing more content like this, so I can continue providing free legal content, and it doesn't cost you a thing by using easy fundraising. But premium content is essentially my content, which is like this, but essentially builds on the detail. It's much more detailed. There's more content to cover, and essentially it's what you need to increase your chances of getting a 2-1 or a first. I obviously cannot guarantee a 2-1 or a first, but it will help you to develop the skills you need for those kind of grades at university, and also give you the tools you need, because much of it is in your hands. And I also do some exclusive videos as well, only as premium content, which you will not find freely available in any form on my main YouTube channel. So if you are interested in my premium content, please do let me know. You can comment in the comment section below to let me know, and I can help you get access to that, or just keep an eye out on my YouTube channel or socials, because I'll be doing more information about all of that very, very soon. But essentially that now concludes this lecture, which I really hope you enjoy. Just remember, because this is important, like, comment and subscribe. Any questions in the comment section below, and I look forward to doing my next videos and engaging with you further in my next videos. So thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all again soon. Goodbye.